All right, parts of a circle. First, we need to know what a circle is formally, officially. So a circle is a closed two-dimensional figure with all points the same distance from the center. We need that because we need to know how to find the radius and the diameter, and we need to know how to find the radius and or the diameter in order to find the circumference. So it all is going to tie back into finding the distance around the outside. A diameter is a line segment that passes through the center of a circle and has its endpoints on the circle. And here's where it's really annoying if my smartboard pen doesn't line up quite right. So hopefully yours can be right through the center, approximately. Mine doesn't always line up. I'm going to try. So oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes people confuse diameter with radius. Or if you're like me and you're doing a bunch of practice problems and you're using a certain formula, you kind of forget to check whether they gave you the diameter or the radius. So that might be the first thing you do if you're doing a whole bunch of practice. So here's the trick to remember that diameter could make a D. Yeah. If you need tricks to remember things, that's a trick you could use. And therefore the radius is the other one. The radius is a line segment with the one endpoint at the center of a circle and the other endpoint on the circle itself. So here's another cheesy memory trick. If I make a radius, I make a radius going from the center up. If my pen would work properly, I can make an R. Radius. Little memory tricks in case you get the two confused, because like the whole perpendicular parallel thing, you always hear about them at the same time. So sometimes people get them confused.
Or you could do this.
I'm not even going to tell you my other cheesy trick. All right, the diameter, okay, maybe I will. Let's see if we have time. The diameter is twice the radius. There are sometimes problems where that's all it is. It might be a whole long word problem. So-and-so was at a flea market and found this fabulous circular table and blah, 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 and was going to get a da-da-da, and yada, yada, yada. And they act like they're going to have you find all this complex information, like the tablecloth needs to cover it, and plus go over the edge, da-da-da, and then at the end it might go, the radius of the, or at some point it might have told you the radius of the, circular table was such and such, and then at the end, after all this other stuff, it just says, so what's the diameter of the table? And you go, oh, really? I read all that just to know, because the diameter is just going to be twice as much.
That's why I look at the question first.
So yeah, skim the question.
A lot of us skip a lot of the information.
And then make sure you find all the information. Yeah, that's right, George Polya.
And there can always be a question where you're trying to find the discontinuous and you need to find the radius, but it says the diameter, and then you use the diameter for the radius.
And the formulas, you got to make sure you're using the right one. That's the whole idea of reviewing this right now. The radius is going to be half the diameter. So the cheesy trick, I'll just show it to you really, really quickly. Radius is half. It would take two radiuses to make a D. So you got radius here, and then another radius here to make a D. Anyway, moving on. Now we're going to go to the formulas. This is where it's all at. The circumference is the distance around a circle. So someone, once upon a time, I don't know who, I probably should, but I don't, realized and discovered that every circle in the whole wide world, to go around the circle, it takes just over 3 times as long as going straight through the circle. going all the way around the whole circle takes just over 3, and that's where that pi thing comes from. So there's some supercomputer somewhere measuring circles to get more and more precise with what pi is equal to. So pi is that irrational number. That's what the symbol looks like there. I typically just make like a, I love those, what do I call them?
Squiggly.
Squiggly, yeah. I make a squiggly and then I make 2 lines down. That's how I make it, but this is formally what it looks like.
I don't like
So it's spelled P-I. I know you want to eat pie, P-I-E, but no, pi, the irrational number here, is just P-I. And it's equal to approximately 3.14 or 22 sevenths. So if your problem doesn't tell you what to use for pi, typically you're going to use 3.14, or you're going to use 22 sevenths if there are fractions involved. Or if it's in algebra, you might leave your answer in terms of pi. You might say, oh, so therefore the answer would be 22 pi. So once we get into more algebra, you're going to sometimes leave it in terms of pi.
But 22 over 7 is like 3.14285.
Okay, still close enough. All right, so to find the circumference of a circle, you can multiply the diameter by pi. So on your formula sheet, it says pi times v, or pi v. Doesn't say times, but we know 2 symbols next to each other, 2 variables next to each other means multiply. If you're given the radius, you need to double it. And that's where the formula 2 times pi times r, 2 pi r comes from. Yes, sir?
In questions that, like, in MCAT, for example, in the answer, would they suppose that pi equals 3.14?
They'll usually tell you to use 3.14. Mm-hmm. I've seen some places in the journal, though, that they don't say. And then I look at their answer key, I'm like, oh, apparently they wanted us to use 3.14. So a lot of times it's sort of implied, use 3.14. We're going to do the examples at the bottom, and I'm going to show you what I do when I'm practicing finding measurements for circles. I know that if I'm not paying close attention, first of all, I'm not going to clear my ink apparently. If I'm not paying close attention, I might accidentally use diameter inside a radius formula or vice versa. Son of a gun. So what I do is I immediately write down the formulas, depending on whether they gave me the radius or if they gave me the diameter. So what I might do, if I'm doing a whole worksheet that's all about finding circumference of circles, this one I might go, they gave me the radius, I'm going to use 2 pi r. They gave me the diameter, I'm going to use pi times d. Next problem, they gave me the diameter, I'm going to use pi times d. Next problem, I might do that right away to avoid doing all these computations that get me the wrong answer because they actually gave me diameter and I was using the radius or whatever. The radius formula, rather. Notice the second line after saying what the formula is when you're going to plug in the numbers. And it says is approximately equal to. Once I put in either 3.14 or 22 sevenths for pi, I'm no longer finding an exact circumference. I'm finding an approximation. Because if I was finding the exact circumference, you would never finish because it's an irrational number that goes on and on forever. So, I'm going to go ahead with this one and say I'm going to do 2 times 3.14 times 6.2. You can use whatever multiplication symbol you like best. Some people always do plug it in with parentheses. Some people use the dots. When you have 3 things you're multiplying, you get that flexibility. Someone might really like to just do 6.28 times 6.2. Someone else might like to double the 6.2 and do 3.14 times 12.4 or what have you. So remember the commutative property and the associative property? It makes you have that flexibility. I'm going to go ahead and do 6.28 times the 6.2. And I get as my result 38.936. And that's how many centimeters it would take to get around that circle. Some people go, oh, so I should round? No, they gave you a specific set of numbers. Work with those numbers and you might have 3 or 4 digits in the end. And the last one over here, pi, bless you, is going to be 7/8. No, pi's not going to be 7/8. The diameter is 7/8. Doesn't matter the order, but just so it looks the same as the formula that I wrote down. So 22/7 times 7/8. Simplify before you multiply, of course. And you end up with 11/4, which is equal to 2 3/4. Phew. Had a little brain issue there for a moment. And again, that's how many inches it takes to get around the circle.